Perhaps what I'll do now is just welcome everyone. And I think at this time, I will uh, read the land acknowledgement and let you guys know that after this program of stories, Barry will have some announcements for us that we'd like you all to hear. So I'll start with the land acknowledgement. And then when we get started, I'll introduce Maggie. James Baldwin said, "The great force of history comes from the fact that we carry it with us, are unconsciously controlled by it, and history is literally present in all that we do." He's right. Knowing that we all carry history helps us to be conscious of how we allow that history to influence us. With this land acknowledgement, we respect, honor, and give thanks to the many groups of Indigenous people in this country. We specifically recognize and honor the Northwest groups whose land we occupy. Some of those names I cannot pronounce, and some of the names we are not familiar with today because they have been extinguished. But we know and honor the Puyallup, the Cowlitz, the Clallam, the Muckleshoot, the Wishram, the Suquamish, and the Duwamish. Thank you and all others for caring for the land. Thank you for fighting today to continue to protect it. That is our land acknowledgement. And it's about time for us to start. Barry, is there anything else you'd like to say before I introduce Maggie? I can't hear you. I cannot hear you, Barry. I cannot see you.
We're going to have some more people coming in, but go ahead and get started. Please mute if you haven't.
I've muted people, Barry.
Good.
All right, here we are. Maggie Lott. You can take the girl out of the South, but you cannot take the South out of the girl. Maggie Lott is a Southern girl, now a woman, who has lived away from the South for quite some time. But when she tells her stories, the South is there, recognizable in its slight accent, its charm, its cleverness, its strength, and its humor. Maggie is a member of the South Sound Storytelling Guild, and she has been telling stories for a long time. She has honed her stories to her sharpness and sweetened them with a little honey. Maggie has immersed herself in trickster tales, and she has some for us tonight. Now, when she tells, Maggie becomes the trickster in the story. I wonder if the trickster becomes part of her in real life. Is she a trickster hiding in plain sight? Well, maybe we'll find out tonight. I'm delighted to have Maggie here with us to share stories. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you so much, Eva. I am just delighted that you asked me to tell stories, and I do have some trickster stories for you. So, the first story I would like to tell is one of my favorites, Brer Rabbit and Brer Raccoon and the Frogs. And now, I read this story in some different versions, but I will tell you the story that the version that I came up with, but I read it in Joel Chandler Harris's words and a retelling of his words that was reprinted. And he published books of Brer Rabbit stories that he had heard from the enslaved peoples of the South. And he published these books in the 1880s, and then they were reprinted, and then Julius Lester reprinted his stories and retold them for a more current ear. And I just delight in these wonderful stories from the African American tradition. So, Brer Rabbit, Brer Raccoon, and the frogs. Now it was that Brer Rabbit and Brer Raccoon were mighty good friends. Now what they liked to do was go fishing together. Now I suppose that the reason they liked to fish together was because they didn't fish for the same things. Brer Rabbit, he liked to throw out his line for fish, but Brer Raccoon, he threw out his line for frogs. Now there was one summer when Brer Rabbit was having all the luck. Every time he went fishing, he caught a mess of them. And oh, he was fat and slick and sassy. But Brer Raccoon, why, he couldn't catch a frog to save his soul. And they were both over there at the riverbank trying to fish. Brer Rabbit pulling in the fish. Brer Raccoon, no luck at all. And Brer Raccoon, he said, Brer Rabbit, how come you having all the luck? Well, I don't know. I just throw out my line and every time I get a fish. Well, what's wrong? I throw out my line. I can't get any frogs. Don't you remember? Don't you remember when you made the frogs all mad? What? What did I do? Don't you remember, Brer Raccoon, in the dark of the moon last month? You caught King Frog and you ate him up. Oh, yeah, that was some mighty good eating, too. Well, yeah, but now whenever you show your face at the creek, I hear all the frogs. They're all behind you, going, there he come, there he goes, hit him in the eye, hit him in the nose, smash him and mash him, smash him and mash him. That's what they all say behind your back when you go down to the creek. Well, if that's the case, how am I ever going to catch any? My family, me and my family just plumb peaked. Well, Brer Rabbit, he sat there scratching his fleas, thinking a while, and he said, now, Brer Raccoon, you and me been friends a mighty long while. I believe I'll help you out. Oh, I appreciate it, Brer Rabbit, I sure do. Brer Rabbit sat there and considered, and then he smiled. All right, Brer Raccoon, this is what you do. You head down there to the creek, cross the creek over to that sandbar in between the creek and the river. When you get out there, you stagger around like you're bad sick. And then you fall down, and then when you fall down, you kick your leg out once, twice, and then you lay low. Don't you blink an eye. Don't you twitch your tail. Don't you move an inch. But then when I holler at you, you move, and you move fast. Well, that is exactly what Brer Rabbit did. Brer Raccoon did. He went down to the creek. He went down across the creek. He went to the sandbar. He staggered around like he was bad sick. And then he twirled around a time or two and fell down like he was dead. And then he just lay there. He didn't blink an eye, didn't twitch his tail, didn't move an inch. Well, he lay there. Now, up there on the riverbank, Brer Rabbit was just fishing away, watching what was going on out of the side of his eye. And after a while, he called out, Brer Raccoon is dead! Brer Raccoon is dead! And all the little frogs started hopping up. They were in a big circle around Brer Raccoon there on the sandbar. They croaked and croaked. They looked over there. Well, Brer Raccoon, he sure did look dead, He was just laying there, not moving. There was a fly crawling around inside his nose, and he didn't even twitch. Brer Rabbit called out, "Brer Raccoon is dead! Brer Raccoon is dead!" Well, all these little frogs started hopping closer. They came to investigate. Big Frog called out, "No, he's not. No, he's not." Little Frog called out, "Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is." And another frog called out, "No, he's not. No, he's not." Well, they croaked and croaked back and forth, disputing the matter. Brer Rabbit didn't care what the frogs thought. He just sat there scratching his fleas. Well, the frogs started hopping closer and closer, looking carefully, and Brer Raccoon was laying there so still. And then Brer Rabbit called out, "Cousin Frogs, now's your chance. Now you've been trying to get rid of Brer Raccoon, just bury him there." "How we gonna do it? How we gonna do it?" called out Big Frog. "Just bury him in the sand, dig the sand out from under him." Well, the frogs, they went to it. They started digging and digging and digging the sand out from under Brer Raccoon. They dug and they dug and they dug. Sand was a-flying everywhere, and it looked like a storm in the desert. They dug and dug and dug until Big Frog called out, "This deep enough, this deep enough. Can you jump out of there?" "Yes, I can. Yes, I can. It's not deep enough. Keep it up." Oh, the frogs went to it. They dug and they dug and they dug, sand a-flying. They dug, and this whole time, Brer Raccoon's not moving. He don't blink an eye. He don't twitch a tail. He doesn't move an inch. And the frogs dig and dig until they get Brer Raccoon in a deep, deep hole. "This deep enough, this deep enough. Can you jump out of there?" I just can. It's not deep enough. Keep it up." The frogs kept digging. They dug and they dug and they dug until they had Brer Raccoon and themselves in a deep, deep hole. "This deep enough? This deep enough? Can you jump out of there?" No, I can't. No, I can't." Well, now, Brer Rabbit, he just chuckled and chuckled, and then he called out, "Rise up, Brer Raccoon, rise up and get your meat." And then, that very night, Brer Raccoon and all his family had some mighty good eating. Now, Brer Rabbit, what a trickster. Now, this next story is a Molly Whuppie story, and I found Molly Whuppie several years ago. Molly Whuppie are stories that are based on the Jack tales that came out of the Appalachian Mountains, trickster tales. Now, of course, these tales came from Europe, and then the settlers who moved into the Appalachian Mountains, they were there and they kept telling these stories. And then the stories shifted to that new time and place. And then Anne Shelby, a storyteller from Kentucky, a current day storyteller, took these old Jack tales and wanted to put a female lead in the stories. And so she created these Molly Whuppie stories based on the Jack tales. And so this is Molly Whuppie, the fiddler. Now, Molly Whuppie was a girl who was a grown-up girl by the time of this story, and she wanted to go out on her own. She wanted to see the world. She wanted to make her own money, and she wanted to spend it how she wanted. So now she had been living with her mama and daddy and big sisters there up in the mountains, up in the hills. But she said, "I'm leaving. I'm going to go get myself a job and make my own money." And there she went, a-walking down the road looking for work. Well, now she talked to a big lot of people, and she went all around to a big lot of places, but she could not find a job. Oh, she looked and looked, and she was so discouraged. She's just about ready to turn around and go back home when she come upon this big, fine-looking house. And on the gate, there was posted a sign. It said, "Help wanted, knock on door." Well, Molly Whuppie, being her own self, just walked right up to that door and knocked on it loud enough to wake the dead. And who should open it with this big, tall, giant of a man? Oh, he was big, he was huge, he was burly, he was hairy, and he was rude. Right away, he started fussing at her. "What do you want?" And she said, "Well, I'm here to look for a job." And he said, "Well, I got a job, but you'd have to do exactly what I said, and you can't dispute me." And Molly said, "Yeah, I know what a job is." And then he said, "Well, if you work for me, I'll give you a sleeping room all to yourself, a feather bed, and all your eats besides." Now, Molly thought about that. She thought that was a wonderful deal because, well, she had always had to sleep at the foot of the bed, and her big sisters were bad to kick in the night. And so she thought that would be wonderful. And she up and said, "I'll take it," before a word was ever said about the pay. Now, she thought of it in the night. That giant didn't mention anything about her salary. She determined to ask him. First thing in the morning, she asked him about her pay, and he said, "I'll pay you a penny a year." "Well, I thought I'd make a bit more than that." "Well, that's all I can afford. Take it or leave it." Well, jobs were hard to come by, and, she was getting her food and a bed to sleep in, and so she said, "All right, I'll take it." Molly worked for that giant a solid year, and at the end of the year, she did not get a payday. But she kept on working. She worked another year, and at the end of the second year, still no money. Well, she was mad, but she kept on working for him. She worked 3 solid years, and at the end of that year, when he didn't pay up, she said, "That's it, I quit. You pay me my 3 cents, and I am out of here." Now, that giant tried every which way he could think of to get her to stay on and work for him, but he wanted her to work for him and not pay her. She said, "Nope, that's it, I want my pay." Well, it just about killed him to pay her 3 cents. He was just that tight. But he did. He gave her the 3 cents, and she took off. Walked on down the road heading into town. Now, she was thinking about all the things that she could buy with her 3 cents. Now, Molly didn't know anything about money, had never been around folks with money except for the giant. And so she thought she could buy a big lot of things with that money. She had worked 3 years. Surely it was worth something. She thought she would go to town and buy herself some new clothes, some new shoes, a new hat. She wanted to go to a nice restaurant, have someone serve her, and she was hoping she had enough for some peppermint sticks and chocolate drops. As she's walking along, here come a woman carrying a child. Well, naturally, they said hey to each other and started talking. And so this woman started telling her, "Oh, I hate to beg, but could you give me a penny? I have got to feed this child, and I don't have any money." "Oh," said Molly, "here." She gave the woman a penny, didn't think a thing about it. And the woman thanked her, and they parted ways. Well, Molly walked on, walked on. Here come a man down the road. They said hello to each other, and he was just a raggedy-looking fella, so skinny and pale. Turns out he hadn't had dinner in 2 days. Molly said, "You take this penny and go get yourself some food." Well, she kept on walking, and pretty soon here was a woman on the side of the road, sitting on a log along the roadside, and the woman was just a-crying and a-crying. Molly went and sat down next to her and said, "What in the world's the matter?" And the woman said, "Oh, my landlord's going to throw me out if I don't pay up tonight, and I've got to pay him. All I need is 1 more cent." Molly said, "Don't you worry. Here, you take this money." And the woman, she smiled, but she didn't take the money. She said, "Molly, let me tell you, I have been sent here to test you, along with that other woman and that man, and you, Molly Whuppie, have passed with flying colors. Now, I can now give you 3 wishes, any 3 wishes you want." Well, now, Molly, she knew exactly what she wanted, because many a time she had laid awake in bed looking up at the moon and the stars, just thinking if such an opportunity should ever come up, what would she want? She knew exactly. She said, "Well, first I want me a slingshot. But not just any slingshot, a magic slingshot. I want me a slingshot that'll go to hit anything I aim at. And second, I want me a fiddle and a bow. But not just any fiddle and a bow. I want a magic one that when I go to play that fiddle, that anybody who hears that music, they will commence to dance, and they cannot stop dancing as long as they hear that music. Yeah, and third, I wish I had a new pair of shoes. The shoes I've got are just about worn out." Well, the wish woman looked down at Molly's shoes and said, "Oh, yes, honey, you do need a new pair of shoes." She said, "Now, Molly, you close your eyes and you sing a big, long country music song. And when you are through, you open your eyes and you will see what you will see." Molly did. She closed her eyes and she started singing. She sang this long song with lots of voices, and it was all about this man, and he had lost everything in his life. He first lost his house, then he lost his farm, and then he lost his pickup truck, and then he lost his wife, and then he lost his girlfriend, and he even lost his hunting dogs. And when he was dead and buried, Molly opened her eyes. And she looked, and the wish woman was gone, but down there at her feet, there was a slingshot, a fiddle and a bow, and the cutest new pair of shoes. Well, right away she put on her shoes, and then she picked up her tricks and headed on into town. Now, it turns out that when she got there, people were all over town. Well, there was something going on, some kind of a fair or something, because there were all these booths up and down the main street, and people were walking all around, and there were food booths and game booths and all kinds of stuff going on. Well, Molly walked along looking and looking, and then she saw there was a group of boys over near the courthouse. They had all their slingshots out, and then they had a bunch of rocks in front of them, and they were betting each other. They were betting that who could hit the knothole in the top of the courthouse tower, and that's what they were doing. Well, Molly wanted in on it. Well, they didn't want to let her in, her being a girl and all, but she would not be denied, and she kept talking to him, and finally they let her in. And then, when it was her turn, she got up there, she looked at that knothole, she picked up her magic slingshot. Now, even if she hadn't had that magic slingshot, she had a sharp eye and a strong arm, and she pulled that back, and that rock hit that knothole right in the center every time. Pretty soon, Molly Whuppie had a great big pile of money right in front of her. Well, everything was going along fine until Molly looked up, and down the street there she saw It was the giant, and he was stomping down the street. And when he come up and seen Molly with all that money, ooh, he flew into a rage. He was so mad, and he looked at her and he said, "Look at this girl with all this money. How'd you do that? That just is not right. You shouldn't have been using that slingshot." And right away he turned tail and he huffed right down the street to the sheriff's office, barged right in, and told the sheriff in no uncertain terms, "I want you to go out there and arrest that girl, Molly Whuppie. You look down out there. Do you know?" And then he told a bald-faced lie. He said, "That girl stole all that money she's got from me this very day from my house. And I want you to arrest her. And if you won't do it, I won't support you in the next election." Well, that sheriff, he got busy, and he deputized the giant. He deputized all the folks around, all the men, and that posse formed, and all of them started walking down the road towards Molly Whuppie. Well, when she saw them, she knew exactly what to do. She just picked up her magic fiddle and she commenced to play. Oh, she was burning it up. And then when all the people around her heard the music, well, they started dancing. Even the ones that didn't know how to dance were dancing. Even the ones who didn't believe in dancing were dancing. Even the ones who thought dancing would lead you straight to hell, they were dancing a jig. And then all that posse with the sheriff and the giant, they all come up the road, and Molly Whuppie saw them, and she just kept playing her fiddle. And the sheriff and the giant and the posse started in a stomping and a clomping and a dancing, all linked in arms. Well, Molly Whuppie, she just smiled, and she picked up her money and put it in her pocket. She picked up her slingshot, put it in her pocket, and there she went, a-walking down the road, a-playing her fiddle, and a-walking in her new pair of shoes. And that's Molly Whuppie. Now, this next story is my own story about a time that I was a trickster. Only, I have to say, I was only about 8 years old. Now, my sister is on our Zoom tonight, and this story includes my sister. We have always called her Sissy. Her name is Mary, but we've always called her Sissy. Now, this story happened at my Grandma Maggie's house in Selma, Alabama. Now, my family, my dad was in the Army, so we moved around all the time, but every time we had a holiday or a vacation, we would head to Grandma Maggie's house in Selma. So now Grandma Maggie lived in a real old house. In fact, she was born in that house and she lived in it most all of her life. My dad lived in that house most of his growing up. But that house was older than that because my grandmother's mother, Ida Agnes Lewis Harris, lived in that house most of her life. It was really an old house. Now, all the land behind my grandma's house was cultivated. It was my grandmother's father who used to farm that land. And I remember as a young child walking up and down the rows of corn and okra and squash and greens and tomatoes. And there was a chicken coop out there and chickens. I remember going to get some eggs there. And there was a fig tree right outside the kitchen. Then Grandma taught me how to make fig preserves. We'd have that with our biscuits. So there was, and there were pecan trees all around the house, and she used to harvest those pecans and sell them. So, now that house, that kitchen, of the house. That always felt to me like the heart and soul of the house, because that's where we would gather. We would sit around the kitchen table, and that kitchen table, an oval-shaped oak table with the claw feet. Grandma always kept a red and white checked oilcloth tablecloth on it. And in the middle of the table, she always left all her condiments. There was always pepper vinegar to sprinkle on your collard greens. It was around that table that I first heard stories, because I never heard a folk tale told when I was growing up. I was read many a folk tale and fairy tale, but not told. But what I heard was family stories. So people would sit around the kitchen table and talk, have a cup of coffee, and they'd talk and they'd tell, oh, remember that time Grandma got so mad at Granddaddy, and oh, remember that time of the big freeze, and remember that time when Granddaddy climbed up on the roof, and all like that. That's where I heard stories. And so when I read a story from the South, I hear that Southern voice in my head, and I just try as best I can to recreate it and tell it the way I hear it in my head from hearing those folks around Grandma's kitchen table. But this story, I wanted to tell you that so you'd kind of get a picture. So this story happened in my Grandma Maggie's kitchen. Grandma Maggie called me and my sister in because she had important business to talk to us about. Mom and Daddy were standing behind us to witness. Grandma Maggie had me and my sister, and on the kitchen table, she placed 2 pieces of jewelry, a bracelet and a necklace. And she said, what I want you to do is choose which one you want. Who wants the bracelet? Who wants the necklace? And then you'll get these when you grow up. Daddy will hold them for you until you're grown. And then she explained that this gold jewelry came from Aunt Bama. Now, Aunt Bama was not my aunt, and she wasn't my father's aunt. She was my grandmother's aunt. She was born like in the 1880s, and so I didn't know Aunt Bama, but I heard stories about her, so I knew her. But anyway, Grandma said, I want you to have this jewelry, so you choose. Now, the jewelry, the gold bracelet, was a wide band, and it opened like a clamshell and clasped back together. On the outside edge of the bracelet was a fine etching of leaves and flowers. I thought the bracelet was beautiful. Right away, I coveted the bracelet. It was just simple and elegant, and already at that age of 8 years old, I already decided that's what I liked. That was my style, simple and elegant. I didn't like a lot of extra decoration. Now, the bracelet, the necklace was, to my eye, gaudy as all get out. Oh, it was just way too much. The chain was real thick and heavy gold. It wasn't light and delicate. And then in the middle of the necklace, there was like this gold bar or like a bow tie design. It had all kinds of carvings in it to my eye. And then hanging from that was a pendant as big as your thumb, had a bird of paradise etched into it. I thought the necklace was gaudy. I didn't like it. I detested it. I did not want the necklace. But of course, I didn't say any of that. I just stood there looking at it. Now, I don't remember thinking through anything. I don't remember planning what I would say or thinking how I would get the bracelet and not the necklace. I don't remember that. But what came out of my mouth was, oh, that's a pretty necklace. My little sister 6 years old at the time, immediately said, "Oh, I want the necklace." And I said, "Okay, I'll take the bracelet." I came across as this sweet, kind, big sister who was willing to let my little sister pick what she wanted. I didn't think at the time that I was manipulating her or, tricking her. I don't really remember thinking that, but that's what I did. Now, as an adult, I have taken a psychology class, and I remember the teacher saying children will learn to manipulate if they can't get what they want by being honest. And I think by age 8, I already had 3 siblings. My sister was 2 years younger, then my next brother, then my last brother. I was the oldest of 4 at 8, and I guess I had already learned how to get a thing or two I wanted. So I learned that, got the bracelet. At that point, everybody knew I was supposed to get the bracelet and Sissy would get the necklace. And that bracelet to me is just such a treasure because it came from my grandmother who wanted me to have it, because my mother told me years later that my grandmother bought it from her cousin Frances Ann, who had inherited it from Aunt Bama. And so she wanted something for her granddaughters to have, some fine gold jewelry. And I treasure it, and I wear my bracelet at every important family occasion because it's from my family and from my Grandma Maggie. Now, nowadays, though, I have to tell you, when I see my sister's necklace, it really is a beautiful piece of jewelry also. Now, I wanted to tell you that story before this next story. This next story is a folk tale that came from Joe Hayes, a storyteller from the Southwest. And it's called In the Days of King Adobe. And there's abuelita, and there's tortillas, and there's an adobe brick. But I liked the story, but I kept thinking of it as my grandmother in her house in Selma. And so I used that story as inspiration and shifted it to my Grandma Maggie's house. So this is a story from Joe Hayes, In the Days of King Adobe. Once there was an old woman. She lived all on her own in a little house on the outskirts of town. Now, this old woman, she didn't have much, but she was very resourceful and very thrifty. And now she kept a garden out back where she'd raise her own food, her vegetables, and she had her chicken coop out back where she had her eggs. And when she had extra, why, she'd take it into the market in town to sell. Now, in this way, she would save her money a little bit here, a little bit there, and she would save it in order to buy the things she needed, her coffee, her cornmeal, and when she had enough, a big 5-pound hickory smoked ham. Oh, she loved ham. Well, she had that ham in a closet, hanging on a hook in a dark closet to keep. Now, it happened one night. There came a knocking on her door. Well, she opened it. There were 2 young men, strangers. She didn't know them. They looked travel-worn, dusty. They looked tired. They told her they were out looking for work, walking through the county, and they were hoping to find a place that they might spend the night. Well, she said, I've got an extra bed out on the back porch. You're welcome to it. And they said that'd be fine. And she said, well, come on in. I'll fix us dinner. I'll enjoy having the company. So she invited them into her kitchen, fixed them a cup of coffee, and she went about fixing dinner. Mixed up her corn bread in the hot iron skillet, put it in the hot oven, mixed up her greens, and then she went to that closet, pulled down that ham, cut 3 slices, 2 thick, generous slices for the young men and a thin one for herself. Oh, when those young men saw she was fixing ham for their dinner, their eyes lit up. They were so happy. Seldom did they get such good food at all. Oh, they were excited. But while she's fixing their dinner, they looked at each other, those 2 young men. One of them grinned at the other one winked his eye, and they both smiled because those 2 young men were rascals. They were already in their minds thinking how they were going to steal that ham from that old woman. Well, she gave them their dinner. They ate it up. They chatted, and then they were so tired, the old woman showed them to the back porch where they had a bed. She gave them extra blankets, said, "I hope you have a good sleep and have good dreams." Well, the old woman went down the hall, went to her bedroom, shut the door. But the 2 young men, they didn't go to sleep. They sat up, talking, laughing, giggling, talking how they were going to steal that ham and how they were going to enjoy that ham for days to come. They waited till they were sure that old woman was asleep, and then they crept out of that bed and off that back porch and went into the kitchen, opened the door to the closet, pulled down the ham, and then they went back to the back porch, and one of the young men had a traveling bag. He opened it up, took out his extra shirt, wrapped his shirt around the ham, put it in his traveling bag, and the 2 of them crawled under the covers and went to sleep. But that old woman, she had not gone to sleep. Oh, no. Now, in her many years of living, she had learned a thing or 2 about human nature, and she knew a rascal when she saw one. So, no, she had not gone to sleep. She had sat up listening. And when she heard them moving about, she crept over to her door and cracked it open and peered out. She saw everything that they did. And she had her own plan. She crept out. When she had heard those young men snoring away, she knew it was safe, and she crept out, went to the back porch, opened up the traveling bag, pulled out her ham, unwrapped it from the shirt, had brought a big red brick, put the red brick in the shirt, wrapped it back up, and then put that in the traveling bag, and then she took her ham and hid it under her bed and went to sleep. Now, in the morning, that old woman got up, and the 2 young men, they were hurrying to get out of that house, saying, oh, they needed to get on the road quick. But the old woman said, oh, no. Now, you don't know if you're going to have any good food today on your travels, so do sit down. Let me get you a good breakfast. Well, she didn't have to ask twice. They were happy to sit down and have breakfast. Oh, she fixed them a good breakfast. And as she's fixing it, one of the young men say, well, now, you say that we might not have any good food, but do you know that I had a dream last night? And he winks at his friend. I had a dream last night that me and my friend here had good food all day long, and days to come even. Oh, said the old woman. Well, tell me about your dream. I do believe dreams can come true. And the young man, he laughed. He said, well, yeah, I dreamed that we were walking through this fabulous land, and we had such good food. And his friend said, oh, he just jumped right in. He said, do you know, I had a similar dream. We were in a wonderful land and we had good food for days, and the land was called Travelly Bag. They looked at each other and grinned. The old woman looked at him. Yes, she said. And then the first young man, he goes, yes. And do you know that the king of the land was called King Hambone the First? Oh, the two young men, they just tried not to laugh out loud. King Hambone the First, she said, is that right? And the old woman said, do you know, I had a dream myself. Do you know that I dreamed also of this land of Travelly Bag? And yes, there was a king, Hambone the First. But in my dream, the good people of the land rose up and they pushed out that king, and they put a new king up instead, and his name was Red Beard the First. Said the two young men, well, it's just a dream. And they hurried up and ate, and they thanked her. Thank you very much, ma'am, they said, but we've got to get on the road. And they hurried on. And they walked and walked all that morning, laughing about that silly old woman and her dream, laughing about how they were going to enjoy her ham for days to come, and talking and walking as they went. And then towards afternoon, they were tired and hungry, and they saw a shade tree over on the side. Let's go sit there, they said, and we will visit the king of this country. Yes, let us visit King Hambone the First. They just laughed. They went and sat down under the tree, and the first one leaned back and closed his eyes and said, yes, yes, get on with it. Let's pull that king out. So his friend opened up his traveling bag, pulled out that shirt, and unwrapped it. Oh, no, he said. What is it? Said the other one. Look, remember that old woman? Remember how she said in her dream they threw out King Hambone? Remember who she said they put in? Yeah, King Red something. Yeah, look, Red Beard, Red Brick. Oh, no! Oh, those two young men. They were hungry for a few days before they found another kind, generous old woman who would give them a place to stay and a good meal. And you can believe those two young men did not try to trick another old woman. All right, I have one last story for you. And this is a story from Ghana, West Africa, Anansi. Anansi, such a trickster. Now, in most of the stories I have ever read of Anansi, he is a spider. But this one, he is a man. Now, Anansi, oh my goodness, Anansi was a tricky man. He loved to trick all of the people in the village. He loved to pull the wool over their eyes, to steal their meat, to outfox them all. Oh, he thought of himself as the trickiest, the smartest, the cleverest, the one with all the wisdom. But at night, in the dark hours, Anansi would lay awake in his bed worrying. He worried that somebody was out there thinking of tricks to trick him. Oh, he did not want that. No, he wanted to be the trickiest. What could he do? What could he do? He worried and he thought and he thought and he worried, and he came up with the idea. Yes, he thought, I will just go and I will take it from everyone. I will grab their cleverness. I will steal their smarts. I will take all the wisdom for myself. Yes, 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 that's what I'll do. How, he wondered. How can I do it? I will just get a big clay pot and I will put it all in the pot and I will keep it for myself. Yes, that's what I'll do. And so Anansi went and he got a big clay pot and he went throughout the whole village and he just grabbed everybody's cleverness and put it in the pot. He snatched their smarts. He yanked everybody's smarts, cleverness, all their wisdom, and he stuffed it in the pot. He even went to all the animals in the village. He went to Lion with his sharp claws and fangs, and he took all of his wisdom and put it in the pot. He went to Rabbit with his long ears that remembers everything, and he took all of it and put it in the pot. And then he even went to Elephant with his big floppy ears that hears everything, and he took it all and he put it in the pot. And when he had all the cleverness from all the people, all the animals, all the world, he thought to hide it. Where can I hide it? He thought to go get his young son to go with him to look for a hidey hole. And so the two of them walking into the woods, walking, Anansi holding the big clay pot and his young son alongside of him. And they went looking in the woods, looking. A big tree, that's it, said Anansi. I will climb to the top of this tree. I will hide the pot there. No one will know. It will all be for me. I will be the only one who knows. And so Anansi, holding the pot in front of him, grabbed a low branch and tried to pull himself up, but he could not. He could not pull himself up. The pot was in the way. He was stuck. His young son said, "But Father, no, don't bother me." And he tried again to pull himself up, but he could not get up. And his young son said, "But Father, listen so that your ears might hear." "Don't bother me. No, I'm trying to do this hard thing." And he tried again to pull himself up, but he could not. He was stuck. And his young son said, "But Father, if you move the pot to your back, you can climb the tree more easily." Anansi shifted that pot around to his back and held it with one hand behind him, and then he grabbed a hold of the branch and he pulled himself up. And then the next branch, and he climbed to the top of the tree. But when he got up there, he paused and he said, Wait a minute. I thought I had all the wisdom of the world, but I don't have it all. My young son just had a wise idea." And he was so angry. He was so furious. He took that pot and he threw it out over the treetops, and it went flying. And then bang, crash, boom, it hit all the trees, the branches, and when it hit the ground, it broke into 100 pieces, and all the wisdom of the world flew out. All the smarts, all the cleverness, it all flew out over all the earth, and all that cleverness, all that wisdom is available to us all. It is all out there for us to grab a hold of. And I would like to thank all of the storytellers from old who have taken these stories, heard these stories, published them, put them out for us, and storytellers currently who are still taking those stories and retelling them to our current times and places, keeping the stories alive for us all to learn from, us all to enjoy. And I thank you for listening to these stories that I love to tell. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maggie. Everybody give her a real big round of applause for those wonderful stories. I really enjoyed your versions of the frog rabbit, Brer Rabbit and the frogs and Anansi. It's nice to hear those versions. And the story about your personal story, your the bracelet and stuff. I love being reminded of pecan trees. I think you know that I'm from Louisiana, and I hadn't thought of those pecan trees in a long time. So thank you for that. And of course, I always love hearing stories about clever women. I mean, really. And then you did the Molly Fiddler, and then you did Drake, an old woman. Don't even try. So I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So everyone, one more time, a great hand of applause for Maggie. Thank you so much for all those wonderful stories.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to tell.
Of course. And I thank the board for agreeing with me. And I know we have storytellers here, so folks aren't going to be shy, right? Unmute yourself. Yes, Anne?
I just want to say I love Maggie's stories, and I didn't know that I were going to love them even when she's in a little box. I love hearing her stories when I'm in the same room with her, but in the little box, she does so well. Her hands are moving, her face is full of the story, and I love it. So I'm glad I was able to join tonight. Thank you.
Wonderful job.
Thanks, Anne.
And the other Anne.
Another Anne. Maggie, I wrote in the chat that I just had the feeling that we were all in the same room with you. It's like what Anne said. I just have the feeling we were all sitting around your grandmother's table. And you were, it was after dinner and we're all just sitting there enjoying you right there telling stories. Thank you, Maggie. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Now, is that Joy? Are you raising your hand or are you just moving your kitty?
I'm typing. Leave me alone. No. I just typed. Thank you so much to Seattle Storytelling Guilds for bringing this together. And they're absolutely right. We were all in this wonderful experience side by side. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
And what great introductions. A certain hostess named Eva.
Thank you.
Wow, what a gift of words you have. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. I had fun thinking about Maggie.
Maggie,
David.
there was one wonderful moment where you were narrating and you were just yourself, and then and then suddenly you were, back home at your grandmother's place, and your voice just seamlessly segued into that southern voice, and it's like it just sort of flowed. One flowed right into the other. It was really lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can't take that Southern girl, that South out of the girl. I told you.
Maggie, I've enjoyed your stories for so long, and it just was a treat tonight to hear that section, the ones I've heard bits of. But your personal story with your grandmother at the table just took me straight back to a similar circumstance. And my grandmother let me pick something to put my name on. And it just felt like that story became mine as well as yours. And you just do a wonderful job of making the stories come alive in our own personal experiences. At least for me tonight, it felt that way. I was there. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say that Kathy Warren was my son's second grade teacher, and she said, Maggie, you're from the South. Can you read this story to the kids? And it was Flossie and the Fox. And so Kathy's one of the people who set me on my road to storytelling because I loved reading that story to the kids so much. That was one of the stories I learned to tell. And Rebecca Hom, who's on here somewhere, there she is. She's the one who said, well, you can learn to tell that story. And I said, I can't learn to tell that story. She said, yes, you can. So I did, and that's one of my favorite stories, Flossie and the Fox.
And
the kids just melted when you read to them. The kids just melted. They were in your face. It was like, get closer. They wanted to see more because you were the storyteller. Thank you for the time you spent in my classroom.
Yes.